Chapter 19. Tarantulas. By the time Fred got back, the others were awake, and furious, and eating. It is difficult to look angry and chew at the same time, so they put down their bananas to glare at him. "Where were you?" asked Lila. "We thought he might have been cutting off your fingers," said Con. Fred explained about the trap, about the statues, and proffered the berries as a peace offering. By the time they'd finished spitting out the berries, and Max had finished miming being sick on Fred's shoes, Con and Lila had stopped glaring quite so ferociously. Lila offered him 3/4 of a banana. "We found them over there. There's a tree behind that cluster of stones where the earth shows through. There were 5, but we only took 3, in case they belonged to," she gestured with her head, up towards the statues, "him." The banana was a little green, but Fred preferred them that way. He ate as slowly as he could, but it was difficult. Bananas were very rare at home. It tasted of comfort. A light thumping echoed across the city square. It was the explorer stomping down the centre of the citadel, heading in their direction. They began frantically tidying themselves, Con raking her hair with her fingers, Lila straightening back his fur, Max licked his forearms like a cat. At that point, several things happened at once. The explorer came closer. He didn't, in fact, seem to be looking at them. He seemed lost in thought, staring upwards at the canopy as he walked. A rustling made Fred look away, down at the ground, and a snake reared up suddenly from behind a fallen branch. It stood straight up, like the periscope on a submarine. It was violet green with a whitish belly. Its eyes were red. Fred gave a hiss and gestured to the others. They froze. "Don't panic," whispered Lila. "Snakes don't attack, remember." Fred backed away. It came up over the trunk, its neck still a stalk, heading towards him. It didn't seem to like him staring. "I think the snake might not know that," whispered Fred. The snake started to glide across the log towards them. Fred's breath halted in the middle of his throat. He stared around wildly for a stick. The explorer walked straight past them, chewing on a stick with a fierce intent, without pausing in his stride. Without seeming to take aim, he pulled a rock from his pocket and threw it at the snake. It cut through the air and struck the snake in the neck. The snake slumped to the ground. The explorer kept walking. He didn't look back. His eyes returned to the canopy overhead. Fred stared at Lila, at Con, and saw his own shock reflected back twice over. "Where did he learn to do that?" whispered Lila. "And why?" hissed Con. "I thought he'd rather we were all dead. It'll be more convenient for him." "Don't you say that," said Max. "You can't." His face was full of righteous fury. "He killed the snake for us, and he's mine." The explorer stopped walking, and his head whipped around to look at them. Con's mouth snapped shut, and she backed behind Fred, but the man's eyes were on Max. The explorer strode backwards towards them. He bent, picked up the limp body of the snake and thrust it into his pocket. His voice was abrupt, and without gentleness. "I have no wish to have it on my conscience if you die. Have none of you any idea what to do if you see a snake?" "No," said Fred. That should have been fairly clear, he thought. The explorer sighed. "For future reference, walk away, backwards, as fast as you can. Don't run, and hum as you go." "You want us to serenade a snake?" said Con. "Why?" They didn't like the vibration. "Or, if you can kill it, it makes a reasonable dinner. If you really plan to make the journey to Maynooth, you should know that. There are a great many things you need to know to do. Can you fish?" "No," said Fred. "Not really." "Can you hunt?" "No," said Lila. "Can you set traps?" "Any of you except Fred. Who should know now?" "No," said Con. "Why would we be able to? I live with a great aunt. She doesn't trap anything except dust. And mice. But she doesn't eat them." Lila grinned at her wonky tooth shining conspiratorially. "I see." The explorer drew in breath, a heave of air that seemed to cement a decision. "Right then, come with me." "Just Con," said Lila, "or all of us?" "All of you." Even Fred, despite his idiocy. His eyes were hard. "Even the miniature cataclysm in the cardigan." "He means you, Max," said Con. "I've found a nest," said the explorer, "and I will share it with you. But I want to be clear. This is the only help I will give you. I have no time to waste on children." "A nest of what?" said Lila. She scooped back her up and settled him in her arms. He grasped hold of her upper arm and rested his nose in the crook of her elbow. "You'll see." "You'll see," Fred thought, as they marched in a single file behind the explorer, half running to keep up. "You'll see" were not reassuring words when spoken by someone whose fur coat still had the feet and faces attached. The nest, when they reached it, sticky with sweat and their hair full of twigs, did not look as Fred had expected. It was a hole in the ground. In fact, it was barely even that. The ground was covered in dry leaves, and the hole was almost invincible. "What's in there?" asked Fred. He wondered if it might be mice. Did mice dig burrows? He wasn't sure how he would feel about eating a mouse. "Tarantulas," said the explorer. Oh, mice suddenly sounded much more appetizing, thought Fred. "They're delicious. They taste like shrimp cocktail." The explorer looked at Con, whose mouth was open. "Do you have a plan for your face, or are you going to keep it like that?" "You don't actually eat tarantulas?" asked Con. "Do they attack sloths?" said Lila. Back appeared out from her elbow. "We get to eat spiders," said Max. The three sentences were spoken very differently. Fred thought disgust, cautious interest, sheer unholy joy. He said nothing, only leant down to stare between closely at the hole. "Yes, you toast them over the fire, like crumpets." "But aren't they poisonous?" asked Lila. "I am not eating a tarantula," said Con. "As you wish," the explorer shrugged. "If you plan to walk to Maynooth, the day will come when you'll be glad of knowing how." "Right, we'll need some long twigs." "I'm not eating one," said Con. "That shouldn't be a shocking position to take." She turned to Lila and Fred for confirmation. "That's normal." "I want to try it," said Fred. "Why on earth?" "'Cause I don't want us to starve on the walk to Maynooth, and what else are we going to eat? And what if it's good?" Lila's face was interested. "What do you think are the chances it will be, percentage-wise?" "Low," said Con. "Really, disgustingly low." "Who wants to go first?" asked the explorer. There was a glimmer in his eyes. Fred didn't absolutely trust him. Fred looked down at the hole. He thought he saw a shadow move inside it. His stomach rumbled. "I will," he said. "Fine," the explorer smiled. It was not an easy smile. There was something wolfish about it. "It's very simple. Take a stick and jab it in the hole. The tarantula will come out to see what's happening." Fred crouched over the hole and shook the tip of the stick backwards and forwards over the tarantula nest. "You have officially crossed the line between brave and a medical condition," said Con. "It can take a while, so don't give up," said the explorer. "It's a good season for tarantulas. They should be meaty." "He's mad," whispered Con to Lila. "We're alone in a jungle, an actual, real-life madman." Fred kept shaking his stick. Nothing happened. Con visibly relaxed. "It's empty," she said. "Thank goodness it's empty." 4 legs, jointed, thin and hairy, emerged from the nest. Fred froze. "Keep going," barked the explorer. "Move the stick backwards. Lure it out." The spider was emerged was as big as Fred's palm and light brown. "It's a female," said the explorer. "The males are black." His hand darted past Fred and he grasped hold of the tarantula round the middle. He held his fingers well back from the princes, which waved irate at the air. "Do you want to stroke it?" he said. Sloths, when anxious, make noises halfway between a sheep and a seagull. Back let a tiny, shrill beat. Lila stepped back, her arm shielding the sloth's eyes. The honest answer, Fred thought, was no. It was a no loud enough to shake the foundations of the jungle. But the words that came out of his mouth were, "Which way do I stroke it?" "In the direction of the fur, from the head to the back end." "Don't, Fred," said Con. She was standing with her back flat against a tree. She was pale under her dirt. "He's angry at you, remember. He's trying to hurt you." The explorer's voice was dangerously mild. "The bite of this species is no worse than a bee sting," he said. He held the tarantula very gently. "My boy used to," and then he stopped, shook himself and said, "I knew of a child, once, who had one as a pet. It's got tame enough to sit in his lap while he ate." Fred glanced at the explorer, but his face was impassive. He laid his finger on the tarantula. It was unexpectedly soft and quivered under his touch. "Now," said the explorer, pulling a knife from the pocket, suddenly very brisk, "you slice along the back from the neck. Here, so it feels no pain, like this, but don't cut the head off." He cut across the spider's neck, "and then you wrap it in leaves." He dropped the spider onto a large leaf and handed it to Lila, who, shuddered but held it in both hands. "Now you tie it with grass, as if it were a parcel." "Yes, good." "There's another nest, east over here, remember? You can tell a tarantula hole from the opening, shallow at the front and then a sudden dip into a tunnel. The journey to Maynooth takes you through rocky terrain. You'll be able to find them there quite easily. I once went a whole month eating nothing but spiders and bananas. I had terrible yellow diarrhea, but I survived." He set off through the jungle, without glancing behind him. Fred looked down at his hands. They smelt very slightly acidic. By the time they caught up with him, the explorer was leaning over another hole, sweeping back leaves and plants with his caveman's skin shoe. This hole was significantly larger. "Now, This one you have wrapped up like a birthday present is a common tarantula, but this hole," he prodded it with a stick, "it's different. This is the hole of a Goliath tarantula." He glanced pointedly at Con's hair. The Goliath tarantula has hairs on its rump, which it sheds as it feels threatened, and God knows I'd feel threatened if faced with a bunch of children. The hair stings if they get on your skin, like nettles, but far worse. Do you understand? Yes. Good. Never mix up your tarantulas if you're planning to stroke them. It seems sensible advice, Fred thought, if useful only in very rare circumstances. Are they the ones they are called bird-eaters? Asked Lila. Exactly, said the explorer, looking down at her with something like approval. Although they rarely eat birds, mostly toads and worms, and the occasional rat. They didn't need to tempt out the Goliath tarantula. As Fred leant forward to peer into the hole, the front legs emerged. He stepped forwards, fast. 4 legs more followed, and a great round body covered in thick hair. Con retched. Max squealed with delight. Lila stepped in front of her brother, pushing him behind her. She clutched back and more tightly. The spider was as big as Max's face. It moved slowly towards Max's ankles. As calmly as if he were tying a shoelace, the explorer reached down, pressed the spider to the ground with a stick, and gathered up the legs in his fingers. "Hand me some leaves, one of you, and watch your feet. There'll be more." By late afternoon they had 6 tarantulas. They took them home to their fire, and Lila laid them neatly in a row. "Good. Now you have them on sticks until all the hair burns off," said the explorer. "They'll start giving off a squeaking noise. It's the hot air escaping from the space between the leg joints. That's a sign they're done. You can eat all of it, including the face." "The face?" said Con weakly. The explorer laughed. He picked up 2 of the parcels, leaving them 4. "You're on your own now," he said. "Don't disturb me again, or I'll serve you your eyebrows to the cayman like olives at a cocktail party." They stared at the bulk of his retreating back as he strode into the jungle. Fred speared his tarantula on a stick and held it over the fire, watching it turn dark brown in the flames. Lila toasted Max's for him. Con's lay still in its parcel. She refused to look at it. "It's a spider," she kept whispering. After 10 minutes the spiders began to whistle, a sound like a tea kettle. Fred gathered all his courage together. He pulled the tarantula off the stick. It was hot and crispy, but it looked unambiguously spidery. He held his nose and bit a leg off. He was astonished. They tasted a little fish-like and salty like the sea. He took another, larger bite. "It's not bad," he said. Con stared at him. "You're eating spiders. You do realise that?" Max took a bite of his. "It's very delicious," he said. "Can I eat yours if you're not having it?" "No," said Con. "Try a leg of mine," said Fred. The spider made him feel more awake. He could imagine the journey home, really imagine it, for the first time. Walking by the day and eating spiders and whatever fruit they could find each night. He thought of his father meeting him at the dock in Portsmouth, bending in to pull Fred into his arms. He shook himself and tried to push the thought away. "It tastes of fishy chicken," said Lila. "Really, truly, it's not bad. Promise it's not a trick." "Promise. Try mine." Fred burned his. Lila held out a spider leg, very gingerly. Con took the leg from Lila. She sniffed it. "It didn't smell of anything, just the fire," she said suspiciously. She closed her eyes and bit the tip of the foot. Her eyes opened in surprise. "It's not terrible," she said. "It tastes almost like food. I love them." Max spoke with a half of the spider leg hanging out of his mouth. "They should sell them at the pantomime with the ice cream."
So, what we're going to do is we are going to finish our narrative today. We're going to finish with plot point 7. Now, it's only a small one. It's the finding of the map. Now, notice I've only literally wrote 1 sentence. It was at the moment that they realised they were not alone on the island. Now, I've wanted to use ellipses because I want to make sure that the tension is still building, okay? How else might you want to build tension? How else could you write this sentence? Okay, have a go, and then we will edit our final piece of writing. So, just like we would in class, we are going to be editing our work, okay? I want you to go through each of the slides like you did on Tuesday and see if you have managed to edit all of your work. I have added in for this editing station, speech to advance the action, speech to create tension, and speech to develop the characters, okay? See if you've got them and a house point for each box completed.
So, just like we would in class, we are going to have today as an editing lesson, okay? We finish any of the work that you have done so far, and then we're going to take slide by slide looking at different things. So the first thing is you will need a dictionary, or you will need an iPad or Google just to use the dictionary online. I want you to proofread your work, okay? Do all the spellings look accurate? Put a little dot above the word like we would in class, okay, and then find the correct spelling. We would be using purple pen in class, but you can use any other colour if you are at home, okay? So for this editing station, what I'd like you to do is read through your work, put a little squiggle under any of the words that you feel you could up-level. And remember, what we mean by up-level is that you think we can find a better word choice by using the thesaurus or typing it into Google and looking at a different synonym, okay? Things like, I'm thinking if you've used the word said, could you use a different vocabulary choice because you want to make sure that Fred sounds like he's angry, or Con sounds like she's concerned, or maybe the other way around. Okay, have a read through it and see if there's any words you would use, change. Use a different colour pen and write them just next to it, okay? So for this one, we would call these obviously cups, and it'd be the C part of the cups if we was in school. Have a look, okay? Read through your work. It's really important you do this. You should have done this anyway after your pieces of work. Start of a sentence. Have you got a capital letter, okay? Have you been using capital letters for the characters? Have you used them for the proper nouns, okay? Have you been using them for the start of the speech? Go through them and correct them. So for this one, I'd like you to think about using expanded noun phrases. Now, you'd have done this in year 4, in year 3 and in year 5. All it means is simply you find the noun, and you are going to be expanding them by using adjectives, okay? Got an example there. The desolate, derelict building swayed as the ground shook violently. So they've chosen the word building and they've thought, oh, how could I describe the word building? Okay, have a look through your work. We don't want to do it in every single noun because otherwise it's going to get a little bit wordy as our writing. But think about if there are any words, any nouns that you could describe. It might be a person that you want to describe. Okay, it might be the jungle, it might be the setting. Okay, you might want to use a thesaurus for this. Okay. The next task, okay, the next editing station, I want you to find some pronouns, and we're going to add extra information to them. Look at the example I've got. Fred, who was tired, looked nervously over at Con. Max likes the ackerberries, which tasted divine. So we've added some relative pronouns in here. Look at the first example where it says Fred, who was tired. So we've given Fred a little bit more information to the reader about Fred. And I've split that sentence up using commas. I've added who was tired as my extra information about Fred. I could have just put, Fred looked nervously over at Con, but I wanted to add extra information about Fred and put it between Fred, okay? So Fred, who was tired, looked nervously over at Con. The second sentence, I wanted to describe the ackerberries, so this time I've used the relative pronoun which, because we're talking about an object, the ackerberries. Have a look through your work, see if there's any relative clauses that you can add in. So for this one, we've done some work on modal verbs in class. It's all about adding the possibility of something happening, how likely it is to happen. So we could put the ackerberries look tasty. They could be the best thing they've tasted in their whole lives.
I've got some examples of modal verbs there below. See if you can add some in. It's important is this one. Don't just add them in if it doesn't make sense, okay? If you feel like your story or narrative doesn't sound right with adding just random modal verbs in, do not use them, okay? But it's important to have a look and see if you can think they could be used effectively, okay? So this one, we've looked at parenthesis, okay, before. We add in just a single dash in, okay, can be used to mark the point use of parenthesis or to connect two independent clauses together. Look at my example here. In the far distance, they noticed a small den-like shape. They soon realised they were not alone. Notice how I've added that extra part of that information onto the sentence. The sentence still makes sense if I took away the dash sentence, but I'm adding that extra information in there. Okay? So for this one, I want you to go through your work and see if you can add any adverbs. Okay, so words or phrases that modify the meaning of an adjective, okay, or a verb, and they give you more information. So they might say how something's been done. Happily, Fred rose to his feet. Or you might say when something's happening, just before the explorer came. Okay, or where something is. Beside the jungle, beside the tall green tree. See if you can add these adverbs in to your sentences. So this one, see if you can add any similes in there, okay? So it compares something to something different and uses the word like or as. We've done some of this in class before. Again, if your narrative doesn't need a simile or doesn't sound right with a simile, don't just add it in for the sake of it. But it does make our narrative sound a little bit more interesting, so you can always see if you can have a go there, okay? Read through your work and really think, ooh, could I compare this to something else? His eyes were as blue as the ocean. Okay, can you add that in there to add that little bit more of description into your narrative? So again, we've done this in class, parenthesis, which gives you that extra information. It's a bit of an explanation or an afterthought into a passage, and without it, it's still complete, okay? So for example, the beast, hungry and cold, trekked through a deserted wasteland in hope of finding food and shelter. Notice the parentheses there, they've used brackets. If I took away hungry and cold, the sentence would still make sense without it. The beast trekked through the deserted wasteland in hope of finding food and shelter. So can you add any of the parentheses in? Remember, parentheses comes in the form of brackets, commas or dashes. So for this, have a look, and you've been doing this as part of your writing anyway. It's been using some fronted adverbials. Now remember, they always come with a comma. Now you've got on yesterday's piece of work, you've got your fronted adverbials examples. Go through and please make sure you've got some sentences starting with fronted adverbials, okay? You can open your sentences using, you might say, unexpectedly, as quick as a flash, unrealistically, okay? Have a look through the models on the last PowerPoints and see if you can magpie any of the ideas, all right? So for this one, go through your work, see if you've got some coordinate conjunctions in there. Okay, remember they link main clauses together to form compound sentences. Okay, the dog jumped up and he began to bark. I don't like sprouts, nor do I like carrots. Joey ran as fast as he could, yet Jill won the race. Now look at the fanboys there, that shows you all the different coordinating conjunctions you can use. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, or so. Have you used any? Okay, see if you can add some in. So here, see if you can use subordinating conjunctions. Okay, that is where the sentence won't make sense without the subordinating clause there. So, could you use although, as, wherever, in case, though, even if, because, until, since. See if you can see if you've used any, see if they make sense. See if you can add some sentences with the use of subordinating conjunctions in there. Okay?